If somebody isn't skilled in squats or deadlifts, could they maybe hold on to a kettlebell of appropriate weight for them and do like a kettlebell squat?
I'm going to give them an even better solution. And this is this concept that I learned from a PhD named Pat Davidson. And he talks a lot about high ground, low ground movements. Skeletal muscle has not had its moment yet, and in particular, resistance training. You're not going to be able to be effective at maintaining a VO2 max if you do not have healthy skeletal muscle. Mm-hmm. You are not going to be able to be effective at nearly doing anything or surviving any kind of illness. The higher the amount of skeletal muscle mass you have, the healthy skeletal muscle mass, the greater your survivability against nearly any kind of disease.
Remarkable.
For example, cancer cachexia, which is the wasting that comes with cancer, kills 20% of individuals. Survivability comes from the health of skeletal muscle. Also, on that same note, contracting skeletal muscle releasing myokines interfaces with cells of the immune system. We've all heard of macrophages and the cytokine storm, interleukin 15, TNF alpha as being pro-inflammatory. When the myokines, which are also interleukin 6 and interleukin 15, are released from skeletal muscle, they interplay and they somewhat dampen the inflammatory effect and have a different effect on the entirety of the system when these, quote, cytokines come from skeletal muscle.
Incredible. So as long as we are now on the topic of exercise, let's make it concrete. Let's talk about resistance training. What is your program for resistance training? And then we'll talk about what other people might consider for them. And maybe the same thing. So if you could just actually walk us through your week. What does it look like? It could be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, et cetera, or it could be, how many days a week do you resistance train?
Of course. You didn't know I don't do any kind of training.
Yeah. Well, I know based on your Instagram that you do, and now we know why.
So I have a wonderful trainer, Carlos Mata, shout out to him. Every Monday, I decide I don't want to train. And
Really?
I know that, of course.
You don't enjoy it?
I do, but it's usually suffering, at least Monday. Every morning, I know Monday morning is going to come up and I'm going to think about all the ways in which I can get out of it. I never get out of it. I always show up. I train consistently 3 days a week, and I train pretty heavy for my size. So I'm maybe 110 pounds. What I do is I do some kind of push, pull, hinge, squat.
On all 3 of those days?
I do.
So you train your whole body?
I do.
3 days a week, separated by a day in between?
I do because essentially I'm working hard enough where I'm pretty exhausted. So I came here and you asked me if I trained this morning. Friday, I'm off today.
Okay.
But what I do is when I start, I think about, well, actually Carlos thinks about this, but I'll do some kind of sled push. It will be loaded. It will be pretty heavy. It gets my full body moving, and then we'll pick some kind of compound movement, whether it's a
multi-joint movement.
That's exactly right. A multi-joint movement through full range of motion.
So for instance, a squat or a deadlift?
That's right.
If somebody isn't skilled in squats or deadlifts, could they maybe hold on to a kettlebell of appropriate weight for them and do like a kettlebell squat?
I'm going to give them an even better solution. And this is this concept that I learned from a PhD named Pat Davidson. And he talks a lot about high ground, low ground movements. And a high ground movement would be something where you have contact like a hack squat. So ground, you have back support, leg support. You are able to move in a way that fully contracts the muscle that you are focused on. We see a lot of people that go to the gym and kind of just do whatever. And that might be okay to maintain, but the goal should always be, ladies, you're not going to get bulky, should be hypertrophy.
Which is hard to achieve,
It is hard to achieve, but you must focus, because maintaining and growing skeletal muscle mass as you age, it becomes much more challenging. And so choosing high ground movements, I would not have someone who is an unskilled lifter go in and do a front loaded goblet squat.
Or free weight squat or deadlift, right?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would have them do high ground movements. And this is where machines are really, really wonderful. People kind of will say, well, but you have to train for functional movement and functional. Well, what is that? We're training for life.
Right.
We're training for life durability.
And if I may, Anytime people say, what's the best form of exercise? How do you work out, et cetera? I always say rule number one, definitely train, but don't get hurt or avoid getting hurt. The moment somebody approaches exercise and gets hurt, they're in trouble. One of the best ways to get in shape for your entire life is to avoid getting injured, but still train.
Or train your entire life. If there are parents listening, thinking about your kids, there was a whole push where kids shouldn't do resistance training and shouldn't move load. I look at my kids, they might not be doing 1 rep maxes, but they're picking up kettlebells. They have,
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was told growing up to not touch the weights until I was at least 18. At 16, I started doing, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and then pretty quickly moved into all the leg press, leg extension, all that stuff. Couldn't help myself.
But I would argue that outside normal play, someone is never too young to start, and frankly, never too old.
And body weight resistance is, in many cases, sufficient, right? As a kid, I would do, at night, I would do sit-ups and handstand push-ups against my door. I couldn't do a proper handstand unassisted, but I'd flip over and then do the handstand push-ups until my mom would yell at me about the marks on the door.
Fair.
But that's was pretty tough, right? Getting 10 repetitions of that was pretty tough. But you're saying resistance training, what you said, high ground.
High ground,
Okay.
contact, high contact. So when you are choosing motions that an individual is unskilled to do, I think let's frame this, is that most people think about exercise for optimization and performance. But if we take that back a notch, and I think about my audience, and they are individuals that are, aside from the special operators and aside from the CEOs, they are 40-year-old women that are like, hey, all of a sudden I noticed that my body composition has changed. I work with an amazing PhD. Her name is Victoria Fleckar, and she has helped me bring into these pieces of how do we design and think about training protocols and training programs for the more mature individual. And when you think about these high ground movements, if someone has not trained and they're thinking, well, I don't want to fall, so I'm going to do box jumps. That plyometric movement, there's a high probability of injury. What do people need to do? And that is when you train for hypertrophy, which is muscle growth. And let's say that is 5 to 10 reps, 4 to 5 sets, you pick. There's many different ways that
where the final repetitions are challenging.
Where the final, and the load is enough. And there's wonderful data out of McMaster University that it doesn't have to be heavyweight as long as the stimulus is enough. And then we take it back to what is the stimulus? And the stimulus, the goal should be, are you moving the muscles that you are supposed to be doing? And are you generating enough activity to create adaptation and change? And so a high ground movement for someone who's listening to this and is thinking, I need skeletal muscle health. Walking is wonderful, but is walking enough to maintain those type 2 fibers? It's not. You will see a transition, and we've all seen our aging parents. My dad is in his 70s. He's very fit, but he used to be a collegiate wrestler. He went to Wharton. He was captain of his wrestling team. Dad, you're a lot smaller. And part of the reason is the failure to focus on hypertrophy, and those are those type 2 fibers. Those type 2 fibers that transition with age to more type 1 fibers, those long, lean fibers. You go from bigger to bulky to less. Choosing activities to maintain those fibers. Also, these fibers are bigger. This is where glucose disposal goes. Choosing things like leg extension. It's not a bad thing. If you get stronger and you have stronger muscles, then you will have more power. You'll be able to generate more force. You will be much less likely to fall.
And you'll be healthier overall because of muscle health.
Thanks for watching. If you found this information helpful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more health and wellness tips.